We are live, apparently. Scheduled to go live in 5 minutes, but the light is so good. I don't think you can actually see the sun here. I am in beautiful, sunny Holbrook, Arizona. Kind of got turned around and kind of kept going for a little ways because it was just so beautiful out here. And then the sun started setting. I was like, right at about time that we do sermon too. So I said, you know what? We're going to stop right here. We're going to do sermon right here. I would play you an opening hymn, but I still haven't figured out how to do that on StreamYard on my phone. I don't think it's even possible if you want to believe that. I have a cool new video. Anyways, it is what it is. Hello, Diana. It's good to see you. I don't know how many of you saw on YouTube. I tried to post it on Facebook. Facebook was being picky. Lisa, I'm glad you were able to make it. But I posted on TikTok where it's going gangbusters. Here on YouTube is a typical non-starter. I don't know what Google has against us. But there's this new video I just posted called What is Overview? And I've been sending it out all day, like manually to individual people. Sorry if you aren't one of them. Chances are at some point tonight or tomorrow, I may reach out to you and say, hey, by the way, I posted this video. But I was literally up all night making this video when I should have been sleeping, and I'm going to get yelled at for that. But, it is what it is. And the thing is that what was it? About 6 months ago. Yeah, late 2025. I started humming this tune and hearing in my head this chorus, like I do with the Godless hymns, which are, our Godless hymns. I don't know if you guys have seen this yet. Are becoming one of the most popular things about Korohorism. I don't know. I'm going to remind people, I'm sure you guys heard me mention this before, but Mitiga, who is out there, I've given critique to, and just mentioned to him actually a couple hours ago on WhatsApp that I was glad that he took it constructively because it could have gone another way. And he's out with his missus and with the family, and I'm glad for them. It sounds good. I sent him the new video, and I'm like, look, I know that you said that your new favorite song is Look Up, and startled but glad, grateful, happy for him. Love that for us. But I thought you might like this. I don't know. I doubt you'll like it as much. But there's this new song that's called One Less Than One. And I said, it's not the whole song. This is a devotional. Basically, when I saw it in my head, I said, I'm going to tell the story of Ed White and the overview effect and how it is that we came to decide on overview, both as a name for our godless meditation practice and also as a practice. And so it's been going really well in that regard that I actually finally, after, so many attempts, I was like, it comes in, I remember hearing it in my head, and like, I hear this chorus. I'm doing my Amadeus thing, imagining that I'm Mozart, right? And you guys have seen the movie Amadeus, obviously. I'm just kidding. Obviously, I don't know all of you. I don't know if you all are cinephiles like me. There's this movie, Amadeus, and Salieri, played by, what's his name? Well, anyways, it came out when I was 4 years old, and I didn't see it then. And it's a travesty. Now it's like one of the most requested React videos out there. You guys will tell me if you can't hear me, right? Well, I guess if I ask you to do that, will you tell me if you do hear me? How about that? And then I did send out an invite to people who want to join on StreamYard. Wait, let me see if I can paste it in here. Let's see if it goes. It might flag it. Sometimes it does. Obviously, it says 10 minutes because I had posted it like that in my groups and stuff. In any event, hopefully it'll show me if somebody's in the queue waiting. Anyway, so hop on up here if you guys want to join in. But I was thinking as I was driving and I was talking about, sometimes what I do is I pretend when I'm gearing up for what I'm going to write for a Godless sermon, is I pretend I'm being interviewed by somebody. Sometimes it's somebody in our community, like Mormon Stories, or anybody, just as a kind of like an innovation prompt. Or no, that's not the word I'm looking for. What is it that Dan Dennett used to call it? He called it a intuition pump. I'm not sure that I'm using that correctly, but the concept stuck with me. I'm about to lose the light. I hope you guys can see something about this sunset. That was the whole idea behind stopping here. I'm gonna hop up and see if my camera adjusts its exposure so you can see where. I mean, do you see why I decided to stop at this? A moment ago, I was thinking that we would go this direction, and of course, it went. And because that was prettier that direction a minute ago, but obviously, yes, everybody hears me, right? Somebody throw out there in the chat, Joe, we still hear you. Otherwise, if you're all laughing at me and not mentioning that we can't hear you, man, fuck you guys. What's going on? I thought we were friends. It's not great for the hair, but whatever. The hair does what it wants. Or whatever, what the wind wants. But that sunset, right? Gorgeous. Thank you. Oh, are you serious right now? Can you guys not hear me? I'm asking Mary Beth, if you are joking with me. Oh my gosh. You are such a prankster. All right. Anyway. So I'm doing an interview. You guys see this over here. Gosh, I was never a road trip person before Adderall. And then I did the street preaching tour. And now I am a road trip person, man. I love it. Anyway. You guys hear me through that wind? Usually this microphone's pretty good with wind. The day that I interviewed Renee Steelman up in Utah, it was so windy. We were terrified that the sound wasn't going to come out. We used these microphones, and it came out great. I was so surprised. And I just did recording yesterday morning down in Phoenix with Beth Magnetic from the former Mormon True Crime channel. And it was so good. I am in Holbrook, Arizona, Harry. So it was like, it was incredible. It was an incredible interview. And we stopped. I'm like, I just have to stop and make sure that the sound is good. She's like, yeah. So we stopped like in the middle because we talked for maybe an hour and a half. Ted Bundy, we talked Israel Keys, we talked about the church's new ad campaign. I'm going to be putting out a video on that here soon. President Christofferson of the first presidency of the Mormon Church is like on an advertising mission about repentance, which if you know what's going on with the Christoffersons in the Mormon Church, yeah, I guess it is. I guess I have been here before. That does sound familiar. That's always windy here. But he's, you're just gonna have to see it. You're just gonna have to see it. But it's like, it's extremely tone deaf considering that this man has a brother that he knew was guilty of harming children. And now his whole message is to call repentance to everybody and say, don't worry, you can leave your sins in the past and not carry them around as penance into the future. And I can't help but go, did you just say that? I mean, are they paying? I was hate watching a Latter-day Saints. I'm trying not to, but I was watching it. As soon as I got to that channel, the church had purchased advertising on their channel. The church is paying them, as Alyssa Grenfell likes to point out. The church pays even its critics that way. But it was paying Latter-day Saints to preach, to have Wade Christofferson's brother, who just happens to be the first presidency, preach to us about how, your sins, once you repent, you can just leave them behind, and nobody needs to be drudging up anybody's sins from the past. And it's like, this is the wrong time, and this is the wrong subject, and this is the wrong doctrine, buddy. Anyway, so I got Beth's reaction on that. So, yeah, but we had a great conversation in any event. So now I'm going to start. It's pretty here. That's the point. Now I'm going to sit down. I'm going to have to turn on the car. This may be a part where I actually do turn a little. Now, wait a minute. This may be where I actually lose sound. I'm going to turn on the car. Somebody let me know if you can hear me still. Not MB. Is that much of a difference? The light? Okay. Whatever. Oh, I have a light. I have a professional grade light that I've been using, and it works. I'm going to turn that. I'm going to see if I can get it. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about reaction videos. You know how I love a good react video. And I'm not going to plug my favorite one. You guys know who. And anyways, I watch a lot of them. But if you watch react videos, sometimes you can get somebody else's reaction to a culture that you didn't realize they're just not growing up with these days. Amadeus was one I was mentioning a minute ago. Today I've had nothing but trouble, man. Tried to get that and tried to get this video published, and my phone won't transfer videos or files of any kind onto my computer. I am lit. You have no idea. Just kidding. I'm driving this, so I'm not lit. I'm just high on life, baby. Let's see where I can put this bad boy. That will actually work. When you get a chance, I would encourage you to watch that video. It's called What is Overview? But it's the new Godless hymn is called One Less Than One. I'm going to go back to that story. Sorry, it's a little disorganized, but I am driving and collecting my thoughts all together at once. One of these movies that gets requested by Gen Xers like me of reactors from the United States is Amadeus, about Mozart and Salieri and their relationship, their frenemy relationship. It's from what I understand, the play was even better, but the movie was. It really is a good movie. And the way to experience it, even if you've never seen it before, watch the reaction videos, because you can watch somebody else react to it for the first time. And it is so much fun. It really is a great movie. I saw it. Well, I did see it first in its full length, but I think I fell asleep. That was back in the days before I adderalized. But they have all these scenes where you can hear the music inside Salieri's head, or you can hear it inside of Mozart's head as they're looking through the things. And I'm like, oh, I do that. Am I a genius? Of course, I don't know that. I don't think that the playwright / director had that much expertise on music. But in any event, it was fun to think I do that myself. But I definitely do it with movie scores. When I was a kid, I loved movie scores. I was obsessed with filmmaking. Obsessed with John Williams, obsessed with Jack Horner, obsessed with when he came around, Hans Zimmer, and loved me some what am I thinking of? Rocky, Karate Kid, and any of that. I love me a good movie score. And I got into video production when I was 15 years old. And I would get so frustrated that, before I could really do good work, I would have to find a piece of music that goes to it, or I would get a wild, it would be so much more work. And, it would get frustrating for clients and for eventually when I started working professionally and for my teachers that I wouldn't get started editing a piece until I found a good piece of music to go with it. If I had to start editing and then add music in later, it was never quite as good. I just really feel like from the time I was very young, I felt like, really what a good video is a piece of music that's played visually with the visuals are one section of an orchestra in effect. And now that I have AI, I know it's controversial, I'm sorry, but now that I have the ability to prompt AI to make the music the way I want to make it, and I pay top tier for the high end tier, which is only like $50 or $60 a month, something. And I know how to manipulate because I've been doing it for a year and the model keeps getting better. I can make the music that I want first. And sometimes it comes right out. Suno knows what I mean. I know what I'm asking for and we develop it. And it's like, literally sometimes it's like a 2, 3, 4 hour process. This time it was like a 6-month process of me coming back and I'm like, okay, this track is called One Less Than One. It's about overview. It's blah blah blah. And it's an epic score, but it's a choir pad backed score with a prominent lead vocal. And I'm like, I would get halfway there. Like it would come out with something that sounded perfectly passable, perfectly usable, fine. And I'm like, considering that I don't, though, have to do anything. I don't have to release this song. Nobody's looking for it. Nobody's expecting it. If it's not beautiful, if it's not perfect, and I can't see the visuals in my head of what the devotional would look like, then I don't want it. So I decided I was going to keep trying. And as of yesterday, I'd said, you know what? I had a direction I wanted to go for Godless sermon. I was going to do it first thing in the morning. Do a morning sermon before I left to head back to St. George. And I said, I'm going to take one more stab at One Less Than One. And as I was thinking about it and I was pondering on it, I said, I'm going to stop and meditate on this because it's a song about the meditation process, about overview. And I said, I want something that really makes people aware right off the bat. This is based upon the experience of astronauts in space looking down on planet Earth for this reason. Real spirituality, in my perspective, and in Korohorism, is about the truth. Objective truth, personal truth. Now I sound like Captain Picard. If you know, you know. And I was thinking, and the thing is that you have to kind of come in hot looking for it right off the bat this is about looking at the world that we actually live in, the way that it actually is. And so I said it would have to open with a shot of this infamous moment, the real thing, not AI generated, the real thing, not even digitally enhanced, because there's some really good digitally enhanced ones. I'm like, I want to see the real footage, the 16 millimeter footage from the Gemini 4 mission, where Ed White performed the first spacewalk of the NASA missions. And he went out there and he's floating barely in camera view. And he's playing with the gun, as they called it, a space gun, but it would eject material. I'm not even sure. I think it's gas. And and he was using it. The objective was that they were trying to steer using one of these things. And that's something that using a handheld device and kind of Iron Man around, that was what the Russians, as I understand it, hadn't managed to do very successfully. And so when the Russians, who had beat the Soviets, had beat us in everything, including spacewalk. But from what I understand, that was part of the problem, was that for the Soviets was that when their cosmonauts were outside the vessel, they found themselves just kind of wandering all over the place, and they couldn't, and so they had to pull at the tether and like pull back in, and it got like stupid dangerous. And that was the concern that NASA had too, was that, man, there's going to be situations where we might have to have the astronauts get out of the lunar module, the LEM, and get to the command module from the outside of the ship. You guys remember, those of you who were here, when I introduced Overview in Godless Sermon 8, I think, Overview Can Save the World. I had brought up Patrick. Well, anyways, Apollo 8 with I want to say Patrick, and that's not right. I don't think that is right. What's his last name? Anyways, Apollo 8, they tried to perform that exact maneuver. What would you do if Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong, in the end of Apollo 11, what would they have to do if they couldn't pass through from the command module to the LEM through the actual dock, and had to get in their spacesuits and EVA, or extra vehicular activity, spacewalk from one to the other and back, or back? And so they decided, and it was a good opportunity to practice the untethered system, or in other words, the backpack, which is really a scuba tank, the backpack that Neil and Buzz would use on the lunar surface as well. And then, of course, I told you the story about how he, while he was standing on the porch of the lunar module performing this activity, he had the first documented case of, they call it space sickness, or I think they call it space sickness or zero gravity sickness, where basically his whole nervous system just kind of freaked out, and he didn't know which way was up. Like literally his body just didn't understand which way was up. And while you can orient it in your mind and think, and maybe will yourself into understanding, okay, this direction is down, so you just think of it like that, you think of it like that, and you're fine. And generally astronauts do pretty well with this. Even professional astronauts will have moments where they experience this. And so they would teach them, my understanding is that NASA actually started after the no, wasn't Borman, Anders, or Lovell, but Anders and Lovell were both on 8. So it was it not 8? Maybe I'm thinking wrong. Was it not Apollo 8? Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was Apollo 10. Anyways, Patrick. Anyways, but his whole nervous system just like freaked out. He was the redheaded guy. But I thought it was so interesting because of all of the astronauts, like most of them, they were either devoutly religious. I think Buzz Aldrin was pretty religious. Neil Armstrong, somewhat, not terribly. But like most of them were either lapsed Catholics, or non-practicing Christians. But Rusty, his name is Rusty Schweikert. Rusty Schweikert. So I'm whichever one that was. Maybe that wasn't 8. I could have sworn it was 8. Rusty Schweikert. And so his whole body just like freaked out. And so for a moment, they were reloading over in the command module, and I know Lovell was there. Maybe I'm remembering that wrong. They were reloading the camera, and they're like, just hold there for a minute. And then that's where they discovered when he had to report to them and say, I hate to do this to you guys, but I don't think I can move. And that ended his career in space. Sadly enough, he never flew again. And but the thing that's interesting is that he was the first I think he was the first test pilot to go up into space. He was an engineer who studied philosophy. And so here you have this guy who's standing up there in space. He was a scientist and an engineer, and he was a philosopher. And this was a guy who never went to church. Rusty Schweickart never. Schweickart. Maybe I'm getting the Schweickart mixed up with the other guy. So, anyways, no, that's 13 is Lovell. No, it sounds like Schweigert. Why am I not remembering names right? Anyways, I could be getting that wrong. Anyways, but he's standing on the porch of the LEM, and outside is Earth. And he records, even though he has seen Earth through the window of the craft. This was a moment where being outside, and even though he's never technically outside, he's in a suit. The EVA suit is a vehicle of sorts. But just feeling like you are in zero gravity, close to zero gravity, looking at Earth, it totally changed his whole life. Even though he wasn't able to move, he was technically still in the LEM. But just looking at Earth, he said the whole experience of doing an EVA, a spacewalk, changed his whole perspective on life. And he realized, looking down at Earth, that that everything that NASA was, everything that America is such a farce. Because it all starts and ends with this lie that we all live in different places with different values, and where people inside these made up borders just don't understand or comprehend what it means to be human like we do. And it's just baloney. It's just not true. And from that moment on, he realized how fragile Earth was, and how all of us are exposed to meteorite impacts, which is a special passion of mine. Those of you who watch the Artemis 2 missions will know, and I've mentioned this before, that Artemis 2, they had phoned into Houston and said, for the first time that I know of, that, while we've been sitting here watching, doing our experiments and taking photos through the window of their craft. Is it the Orion? What's it called? No, of Integrity. While we've been sitting here looking through the window of Integrity, we've seen 4 meteorite flashes just while we've been in orbit here. And they were only there for a few minutes. And that means that while they were there, they saw meteorites hitting the regolith on the moon. And we've tended to forget about this, but we are exposed all the time to meteorite impacts. And most of the meteorites we don't know are there. The government has a fully assembled telescope, the NEO Surveyor, Near Earth Object Surveyor, sitting in a warehouse at Goddard Flight Center, I think, just sitting there ready to go into its fairing, ready to go up on a rocket. But because we got SpaceX guys controlling NASA, I think they probably won't launch it at all at this point. And jury's out on Nancy Grace Roman. The early dates, I think, for Nancy Grace Roman to launch were supposed to be this upcoming summer. Now it's looking like if it's 2027, it'll be a miracle. And the most powerful, most beautiful, most incredible spaceborne telescope ever invented or devised by human beings. And the first orbital, well, it's not technically orbital, I guess. I mean, it's orbiting the sun with us. So it's orbiting the sun. The first spaceborne telescope of that class named after a woman sitting in the fairing, ready to go. And it'll probably, who knows if it'll ever go up. And it pisses me off, obviously. But I was thinking about this, about what it means to experience looking down on Earth and realizing that there was real danger. And as I was meditating myself and thinking about this song that I had come up with, and how I finally had found the thing that it was missing, which of all things was an Irish tin whistle. I said, and then there's this moment where the Irish tin whistle comes in, like the light within from Star Trek: The Next Generation. I always think of that because I want to play the tin whistle. I'm thinking about doing it actually. But also like Titanic and like Braveheart soundtracks. And so I thought, oh yeah, no, now I hear it. I mean, at first I heard Titanic, then I heard Braveheart, and then I heard it totally different. And I'm like, oh, that's it. I don't know why this song is Irish. Every once in a while, my songs come out Irish, like with More Money Than God. I don't know. But sometimes inside in the soul of me, it calls out. I don't think I even have any Irish ancestry. I asked my dad. He said, "No, pure Englishman." He's like, "Rollinses are not Irish." I was the one who informed him. I'm like, "Do you know that's not true? Actually, there are Rollinses who are Irish." He was surprised. But as it came out, and I was listening to it, and I finally all came together, and I stripped out the lyrics as the AI had written them, and I'm like, no, listen, it goes like this. It opens up, one less than one, and the chorus comes in, the choir, one less than one, and slow and easy. It's not building up yet. It's just nice and easy, meditative. I tried it new agey for a while, got way too Enya, and I'm like, scratch that new agey shit. Make it like this, and then kept going, kept trying, doing more generation until I got it. And then the verses just started to it started out, earth glow, please wash me, cast me in starlight. Take these racing thoughts and give my heart flight. And then into the pre-chorus, and then into the chorus. And the chorus was easy. The chorus just flowed out of me. Da-da-da-da-da. One less than one. One less than one. And so I had to go through and listen to. Sometimes it's very fortunate that my autistic brain is the kind that can listen to something over and over and over again as if it's the first time, which is the reason why I've been a video editor, I guess, for longer than I'd like to admit. And I had to listen to this song again and again and again. And while it was so, when I got to the finished one, the last one, it was so deep, so profound that I could just close my eyes and I could see the devotional video. And while I was pondering on that and this, I could see this video inside my head. I reached a whole different layer of like my own little private overview experiment. And it was like the song itself was meditative. And I was like, sweet. If only YouTube wouldn't cut us off for shorts at 3 minutes, or at least me, anyways. Doesn't if only it didn't cut me off at 3 minutes, I would make a whole devotional video where we introduce the concept and then teach people how to actually do overview. And I said, well, that means I'm going to have to actually write down for the finally how the current experiment is going with overview. And right now, I just kind of need to validate that inside my head and just do it. And sometimes things come up for me. I'll come into overviews with an intentionality to say, I'm going to deconstruct what it means, for example, to be a woman with autism or ADHD in a world where all the science for diagnosing and for treatment and for making plans for people with autism are centered around men and boys. And so I'll generally look up some facts about that, some kind of fact that I don't know. It's like how many women have been late diagnosed with autism. Also, what is the studies behind? Because this is how I discovered that they've actually done a study. I don't remember where it was off the top of my head, but they've done a study that shows where they track how common it is for people to be bisexual or genderqueer who are also ADHD or autistic. And, everybody says, well, all women are bisexual or pansexual. It's not strictly true, even if it's more true than not. And I think what I tend to think what that actually means is that men are not always honest about our own sexual fluidity and our own gender fluidity. But I know at least in my case, I can say from an anecdotal perspective, that's certainly true. It's not been until I was old enough to know that I could look a grown person in the eye, tell them that, what my actual feelings are about my own gender and my own sexuality, and not be afraid that they're going to hurt me. And that I found out, I can just say what's true inside of me. Wow. That's some good deconstruction there. I'd gone into this one thinking, let's go back to overview as a concept and why overview is important when it comes to eco stewardship or taking care of our planet, taking care of Earth. And while I was doing that, I was overcome with this internal sensation. I wasn't going to challenge it, because anytime that I would challenge it and say, no, I'm not going that direction with this, I'm going a different direction, it makes me like dizzy. Strangely enough, that's the first time I said that out loud and realized that it's true. It makes me dizzy and I feel like I'm going the wrong direction, like I'm physically facing the wrong direction. And so then I just say, no, look, if this came up, then let's let it go by and observe it. What is it? And all of those React videos that I was watching, and I've been doing a lot of Truman Show stuff, because you guys remember last week I talked about the Truman Show and being angry, the angry phase of deconstructing church. And the thing that came up this time was Mr. Rogers. I would highly recommend to everyone, whether you are from a country or region or background where you grew up watching Mr. Rogers or not, watch people's reactions to the clips of Mr. Rogers. And usually it's just like a 5-minute clip. They do the like the early shows of Mr. Rogers. I think the clip that they play is actually from the documentary Will You Be My Neighbor, which I made my kids watch that. They didn't fully appreciate that. But I made Scarlett and Elijah both watch it. I'm like, you got to watch this. You got to see. And they were both, we know who Mr. Rogers is. I'm like, yes, but it's meaningful even to me now. But it's that segment where like he has to go to Congress and defend why they should give PBS $20 million. Wow. So that they can keep PBS running so that programs like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood would continue. And I would often think, what occurred to me is remind myself, I'm like, that man was a Presbyterian minister. But you never heard him talk about God. That wasn't his mission, which is strange to think about. But I mean, it's strange for me as an ex-Mormon to think about. But I guess in Presbyterianism, maybe that's normal. But his job was to serve children. And as long as children were being served in the needs that they had, then his ministry was good. His ministry was right, was righteous in his eyes. And if you watch people reacting, people, especially people from like Australia or the United Kingdom or Eastern Europe or the Caribbean, who didn't grow up with Mr. Rogers, and you watch grown adults watching this man talking and singing his songs. You know, there's one song in that clip, I think. It's the one that's I like you just the way you are. Exactly and precisely. I think you turned out nicely. And these grown ass adults break down and cry. Almost invariably, just break down and cry. And have to stop the video while he's singing to them. And when he'll sing the song, or he'll quotes the song to the senator in the congressional hearing, and wins back all the funding for PBS. And he tells him, he's here. You have this surly old man, and I don't even remember the guy's name. You know, frowning about why should the government have to fund your program if it's so valuable to the blah 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 blah. And he just tells him about the song. And the guy breaks out in this huge grin and says, I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful. I guess you just won the $20 million. And the thing that he says to him is what came up for me. And these two words, well, predominantly two words. That didn't, I'm like, was this supposed to go in the song? Is that what my intuition is telling me? Nope. No, this is for me, I realized. It's for me and for what my mission is. And he said, I think we will do a great service to the world if we can make children understand that feelings are measurable and mentionable. I'm like, oh my gosh. I've heard that somewhere before. Who said that? Maybe Mr. Rogers said it, and every time people say it, they're quoting him. But that's like a thing, right? In psychology or like childhood development, I think that feelings are measurable and mentionable. And it was while I was doing this, thinking about what is it that overview is? Why is it important? Why am I spending any time when I should be sleeping? Because I got to drive back to St. George in the morning, which didn't end up being till the afternoon because, yeah, I stayed up all night, literally all night making that video. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't rest while the song was done and the devotional video wasn't done. I'm like, I got to get this on TikTok tomorrow. I got to have it on YouTube tomorrow. I got to play it at sermon tomorrow. And then my freaking computer started crashing because, yeah, let's not get into it because it's a nice moment here, but it was bad. I think I got sleep from 7 in the morning till maybe like 9 in the morning. And I was back up and I'm finishing it. I'm like, well, I guess take your Adderall and let's go. And I worked on this thing. There's going to be a train coming through here in a minute. That's fun. You might get a train, guys. You like trains? You like trains? I'm like right in front of it too. And in that moment, I said, and I thought, feelings are measurable and mentionable. Feelings are measurable and mentionable. And I realized in that moment that it was about how long it had been since I wanted to quit this world and had one of my neurotic moments where when I turn fully neurotic and I can't shake that feeling that everybody would be better off without me and how I never was meant for this world and how whatever they call what I'm experiencing, whether it's depression or ADHD or autism, they don't know what it is. And maybe because they don't want to know, maybe because we're just inconvenient to them. And so they don't want to know who we are. They don't know why it is. Yeah. That is irony, Jesse. My 11-year-old would be going bonkers right now. I know he never says train, but I know he loves them. I know he does. And both of my grandfathers, my dad called me out on this. He's like, your grandfather was not autistic. And I'm like, they didn't know I was autistic, Glenn. And he's like, well, how do you know? And I'm like, trust me, I know. And I said, what's your dad's dream job? And he said, making rocket fuel. I'm like, no, that's the job he did, remember? And he's like, well, anything but milking cows. I'm like, no, go back, remember the story. What did Grandpa say? There was an opening at the railroad, and all his life he wanted to work for the railroad. All his life he wanted to spend his time working on trains. And he says, oh yeah, he did say that. And then they thought that he was too simple because he showed up for an interview for the job with the railroad wearing his overalls because he'd been on the field farming, and he's like, sorry, I didn't have time to change or anything, or else I would have come in looking a little nicer. And they just saw a hick farmer Mormon guy, and it wasn't until he was anyways. And so the story goes that my grandpa looked at them, they said and he saw that they weren't going to hire him because they thought that he was just a hick, didn't know that he was the manager of a missile testing facility. It's funny even now. Good story, Grandpa. And he said, how much does the job pay? Anyways, and they were like, trust me, much more than it pays to be a farmer in Cache County, Utah. And my grandpa said, he stood up and said, I never worked for that little in my life. And he walked out. And so, and it's not funny. They just don't know. I mean, like, because it, our parents' generation, being autistic, whether they want to say it or not, I think this is my theory. With our parents' generation, being autistic is a moral thing. Like, it's a failure, even if they don't think of it actively like that. I think it registers in their head as this is don't mention somebody's being autistic because that's morally wrong. And I don't get that, but maybe that's because I'm a literal thinker because I'm autistic. Anyways, but I was thinking about the Werther effect and how I became fixated while I was neurotic. I would spend about 24 to 72 hours every time I would have a really bad episode. I would spend about 24 to 72 hours where I would go down to the freeway overpass and try not to try to talk myself out of jumping. About at the peak, about 3 or 4 times a day. And at the best, maybe once in a day, if I could constrain myself, and it would like taper off. And I would think, boy, if I were not pissed off and hateful of the world right now, this would probably make an interesting piece of scientific information. If I could sit down and write it out, I could send it to somebody, and maybe somebody would get their PhD, doing a study in this. What happens with these people who, their ideation peaks at a point and then tapers off? And yeah, but then I would always think, yeah, and then that's how I'll find out it's only me, nobody else experiences it that way. And then I'll just want to leave this world. And as I was thinking about that and thinking, what was the date of the last time I had an episode like that? And I realized it had been about a year and a half. And it just blew my mind. There are whole years I can remember: 2011, 2013, 2015, 2016. 2016, Jesus. 2017, where I couldn't go longer than a week without without one of these episodes at least 48 hours. And then around the time when I decided to launch the overview experiment, I had gotten into a habit of listening to either The Pale Blue Dot by Carl Sagan or It Is Always Now by Sam Harris. Occasionally I would try other things, like the books of Rollo May were really good for me. At that point in time, Man's Search for Meaning was not good for me. It wasn't until Brett Hartley recommended to me, you should give it another try, that I was able to get something out of Man's Search for Meaning. Otherwise, I just hated that damn book. It triggered me in every way. I think there really should be a warning on it that says, if you're not ready for this book, and if you're in, I don't know what the conditions are, but there should be some kind of a trigger warning about that book. Because it made me go full cascade failure the first time I read it. And I went, who reads this god awful piece of shit? And now I can look back and say, oh, I was neck deep in it then. I was neck deep in existential crisis, and it had become totally quiet. It would just surface in things I would do and things that I would say, not crying out for help to other people, but crying out for help to me, trying to get my own attention. When my feelings were separating out so much, I was becoming so disconnected in my brain's attempt to isolate from danger, that I had completely lost connection with my nervous system, my body's nervous system, whatever that looks like. And I don't know, but I could feel it in my body. I could feel it physically. And rather than say, well, I don't understand how that works, I don't know the science behind that, how that works, so it's not happening, I just said, it's happening in me, so I'm the science right now. I am the data. And just accepting that, I came to realize that if I feel that separation, whatever that separation is, that's when I become really bad. And it's bad. It's not just bad for me, it's bad for my kids. It's bad, I'm not setting the right example for them. And I don't know how to help them when they have panic attacks. And I have to figure this thing out. One way or another, I have to figure it out. And that's when I started to do regularly either the pale blue dot or It Is Always Now. And then Rollo May. But Rollo May is like a whole other thing. And it was while I was neurotic, I would find myself unable to work. And I would lock myself away and I would do research about the Werther effect, which is this, I'm convinced, false idea that we can't talk about people killing themselves because people don't think about it until somebody else says it. Because statistics show that when it gets mentioned or when it happens, that like a celebrity goes in this way, that all of a sudden starts spiking because people who are fragile, people who are triggered and sensitive, it triggers all their, there's a contagion effect. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized they believe this without anywhere near sufficient data to show it. And there have been researchers who have been pointing out for a while that it's not true. And it's dangerous because when we say, well, don't mention it without mentioning, oh, you can call the lifeline at blah, 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 blah. And don't mention it without mentioning, oh, if you're thinking about harming yourself, da, 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 please reach out for the blah, 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 and give this pablum piece of advice and then drop it and don't talk about it, because the more you talk about it is the more that people want to do it. And and realizing in that moment when I was so fragile myself, when I was actually already triggered, that there wasn't data to show that that was true. That this was an assumption made on a novel from the 19th century, The Sorrows of Young Werther by Getty or Goethe. And that there was an article published or articles published, I guess, in German in the 19th century that said that there were a handful of noblemen who had taken themselves out recently, and that all of them had done it in the way that this character had done it in the novel, which you don't actually hear. You don't actually see. There isn't really a description of him doing it in the novel. I mean, there's a description that he did leave, that he did do the big yage, but doesn't describe it in details. And the novel's okay. It's all right. It's a decent novel. It's told entirely from the perspective of letters that young Werther writes to his friends about how in love he is with the woman who is going to marry one of his patrons one of his friends. Yeah. And he's fallen in love with this woman who has a child, and how he sees this child as if she were his child, and he sees this woman as if she were his wife. It's all very similar, actually, to Vincent van Gogh, now that I think about it. And I think, and then the trouble is that she doesn't choose him, and so he does himself in because he can't live without her. And the story came up that ever since this book came out, all these young, adventurous, romantic young men are all doing the same thing, because apparently if these young, vulnerable, impressionable young men, romantic young men, if they get it in their head that they can choose to opt out of this life, they'll do it, guaranteed. And eventually they called it suicide contagion. But for a long time, they called it birther effect. And they didn't have data to show up for it. It turns out the articles were largely just making it up, and there weren't, and the number of cases that they had going on was really not that abnormal for the time, not abnormal for any time. It was that what the real effect was that usually when it happens, that somebody takes the big exit of their own, chooses their own exit, that they don't talk about it. Nobody talks about it. And so when somebody significant enough to talk about happens to have this novel on them, all of a sudden they noticed for the first time. And that felt so familiar to the experience of being autistic, and to the experience of being ex-Mormon, and to the experience of being atheist. Because people will suddenly say, now there's a sudden spike in atheism. Now there's a sudden spike in people leaving the church. Now there's a sudden spike, and you have to look at it and say, is it that there's a sudden spike, or is it that you don't notice people you don't want to notice? And people that we consider neurotypicals, heaven help you, or whatever help you. Get all the help you can get. If there's a God help you. I don't think there is one, but whatever. We've established that. That it turns out most of us may be neurodivergent. We don't know. So if most of us are neurodivergent, the neurotypicals are the divergent. We're neurotypical. It just doesn't feel as good now when I say it out loud. But it would be important if it were true. And I think it's important to find out. And I think that they are finally, there's something moving towards figuring out. I think this polyvagal thing is probably going to pay off. But as I was thinking about this, I came to realize, but that is definitely the ultimate situation where the morals of a Christian society informed the science rather than the other way around. And it was wicked in its negligence about people, and it's still going on. It reminded me, in fact, and all of this is in the context, by the way, of if we are really aware, if you take a moment where you just allow yourself to feel, tell yourself that you are safe. Speak to your inner child, and in words if you must, and say, you are safe. This is not happening to you. You are physically in a safe place right now. You are not in danger. And just to calm your body's, your nervous system, say it out loud if you have to. I do it sometimes. Joe, you are safe. You are fine. Joey, I'll say to my inner child, I'll say, Joey, you are fine. No one can hurt you. I won't let anyone hurt you. You're fine. I'm here now. And nobody's going to hurt you. Excuse me. And in that moment, as I come to realize, this is going all the way back in time, at least to the 19th century in Europe. And then when you look at how common in honor-based societies like the Japanese, how it just became part of the culture to say there's an expectation that if you dishonor the family, if you dishonor your people, if you dishonor your what's the word? If you dishonor yourself, you dishonor your family, your kin, your tribe. They don't say tribe, do they? In any event, you need to take yourself out. And that just, in that society, in honor-based societies, there is an expectation that, yes, everyone will, in fact, be better off. And I think we have neglected to make this thing measurable and mentionable. In fact, we have specifically in Judeo-Christian values actively chosen to pretend to make up fake bullshit science in order to convince ourselves that it's okay to make it not measurable and not mentionable. And because of that, every single year since they started measuring how common it is in this country for people to exit this life, every single year it has gone up. Every single year. Up, 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 up. I'll never forget the first time I said to my mother, I said, at the rate I was looking at it, and it dawned on me that there is a date in the future, I'm not sure when yet, where every child born in this country will be on a first name basis with someone who has taken their own life. And we as a society have no explanation to explain to a child why Uncle so-and-so or Aunt so-and-so chose to leave. And because we have allowed our values to be driven by Judeo-Christian values and Judeo-Christian society, we never will. As long as our values are being driven by Judeo-Christian values, we never will do it. And it occurred to me while I was watching grown adults crying as Fred Rogers made them feel seen for the first time. I never cried watching Fred Rogers as a child. I just thought, when is he going to do the trolley thing? My autistic right. Okay. And it's like, when is he going to do the trolley thing? When are we going to get King Friday? What's with this? Either show me how they make crayons or pennies or balloons. I still think about the balloon one. Or get to the King Friday thing. Just, what are you doing? Do the shoe toss. Okay, good. Now let's go on. But grown adults, they release when they know they're being watched and that they're watching Fred Rogers. They invest their attention in it and hear what he has to say. And these people, in some cases, they feel seen. They express feeling seen in a way they had never felt seen before, and just releases out of them. And I think the reason why this spurred all of this activity and made me think subconsciously, on a subconscious level, I got to finish that song, The One Less Than One. We got to do that devotional. And then I couldn't let it go until it was done. As I was watching this and thinking, it's a thing that I used to research when I was neurotic. And because it's been so long since I did that, I forgot that at one point there were 2 to 3 days every single week where I thought, I'm going to figure this damn thing out. And then I'm going to make it my life's work to expose the hypocrisy. And then as soon as it would subside, I'd forget all about it, or I wouldn't be able to handle it, or I'd just move on, get back to work, making money, or, working on my failing marriage at the time. And it occurred to me in that moment that I'd forgotten all of this, or I'd stashed it away. And it was coming up finally in a way that I didn't feel threatened, and I didn't feel guilty or bitter or angry with myself about it. I felt like now is when the mission starts. This is the hardest thing. It seemed so easy to me. I'm just going to come out there and say it. This is what I'll say. This is what I'll say. This is what I'll say, and then see if who I can say it to, and in what context. Is it a podcast? Is it a documentary? Is it I'm going to communicate these things that I've discovered about how we don't make about how we live in a culture that lies about this all the time. I would call it the lie that everybody keeps. It's the lie that everybody keeps, which is that everybody does it. And then we use phrases like "you're not thinking clearly" and "your brain is lying to you." It's true that your nervous system only thinks about what it's thinking about, only feels and experiences what it feels and experiences. But that's not just true about deciding whether or not you want to exist anymore. That's true about every moment of your life. So it's the point is moot. It's a whole lot of nothing. It's a distinction without a difference. And it navigates all of our policy. It determines how television networks, and this was the worst part for me, how television networks, as soon as they would mention somebody passing, they would say the same line again. If you or somebody that you love, I'm like, is there a law that says you have to do this? Is it just a company policy now to just front the lie? Because I started when I was in my toxic. I'm just going to segue this here just real quick. I promise I'm coming right back. Sorry. You know me, guys. Right about the time when I first got off of Facebook and got out of all the ex-Mormon groups was when people started confronting me about, Joe, we love you, but if you're going to keep saying this, you're not welcome back in these ex-Mormon groups on Facebook. And I can look back and totally see. I totally get it. I'm not angry about it. I totally get it. But I started saying to people, every time somebody would mention the hotline, the lifeline, I would get in their face digitally and say, have you called it? Or I would say, what happens then? And then people say, what do you mean what happens then? What happens when you call the lifeline? When people say you get help, you get resources. Did you try it? Well, no, but I don't have that problem. Better hope you don't. And that I was toxic and angry at the time. And I said, and I was angry that it was about how many lies there were going around and how unhelpful people were, especially therapists. There was a while there where I had to go back and apologize to some friends of mine who were therapists and say, listen, if you overheard me saying something about this, I apologize. I was going through something. And I had friends who were really hurt by it. I was so toxic and so angry. And I was I didn't know how to call out for help. And I brought up something there. Sorry. And I just feel like these memories started to come back to me for the first time in a space where every time I think, is it because it's now? Am I doing it now? Am I losing control right now? Am I spiraling right now? And connected to my body, I knew that the answer was no. No, it's not that I'm spiraling out of control, because when I think to myself, everybody would be better off without me, I feel in my body more than in my mind, if that makes sense. I'd feel in my heart, I feel it in my stomach. or where I visualize those to be, a reaction that said, "Are you kidding me? I just discovered this. That this is my purpose. Nobody needs me. They all need me. I'm one of the few people who's gonna say this, and it's gonna be one of the hardest things I've ever done. I have to figure out the messaging behind this. I have to figure out the branding behind it. I'm gonna have to pull all my marketing and communication skills from 30 plus years of working in marketing, selling people shit that they don't need. I'm going to use it to sell people on an idea, to inception an idea into people's brains, and it's going to be just like Overview. I'm gonna have it in simple phrases. I'm going to narrow it down into simple phrases that you could put on a T-shirt, that you could put on a wristband, that you could put on a hat. I used to do this for companies all the time. MLM companies do. I rewrite things, not just MLM companies. Rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it in smaller, simpler ideas. Boom, 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 until I had the idea. And I was making this devotional video, and I had this, and that phrase, I could feel it working into this one shot. I'm like, I'm not sure what the background is on this shot, but this phrase is coming in, and it's coming in, packing down that very simple idea without using the bad word, the big S word. And it came, and then it finally came out, and it said, "Life sucks sometimes." I couldn't believe it when it was that simple. The idea isn't profound. And yet, looking at it, I knew that it was talking to me as a person who had experienced that long, dark night of the soul over and over and over again. It spoke to me, and I knew that there were people just like me who would read that line, "Life sucks sometimes," just 3 words, and know that they were seen. Because I figured out years ago, that when somebody says, "Life just sucks sometimes," that person was thinking about killing themselves. And on a low level, where you could say it out loud, nobody calls the police, nobody calls for an ambulance. I am safe, by the way. That's not clear. I am good, totally happy, sitting right in front of a train track and not on it. That's morbid. I'm morbid. I make morbid jokes. I'm sorry. I'm totally good. And then I remember, because I sat down and I wrote out things I say or hear other people say that really mean the danger phrases, but subtler, gentler, lower. And then I could hear Fred saying, we need to teach children that feelings are measurable and mentionable. I thought, oh my God. Fred Rogers was trying to save our lives, and we had no idea. I had no idea. I thought it was just about emotional intelligence, and surely it was. But, and especially if you've seen the movie, the documentary, Will You Be My Neighbor? You'll see that at the end of his life, Fred Rogers actually wrote, he'd sit down at his typewriter and he'd write out his feelings. Good thing for him that he figured out at some point in life how to do that, how to make his feelings measurable and mentionable. And even if it's just to himself. And that going through his papers after he passed, they found, I think it was after he passed, they found that he had typed out something, words to the effect of, have I even done any good? Have I even reached one person? And I think his brain was aging and he got depressed. He's a human being like any one of us. That whole time he was serving us and serving children and just giving and giving and giving to everybody else. How would anybody have known to ask Fred, are you okay? To say, Fred, do you need somebody to remind you that what you're doing is important? That it's not theoretical, it's real. And then I remembered that moment where I sat down and I wrote all these phrases out while I was neurotic, while I knew that that wasn't going to do anything. I wasn't going to do it in the end. But that until I could figure out why I wasn't going to do it, or the feeling subsided, this red alert panic subsided, I wasn't going to be able to work. I wasn't going to be able to get my kids to school on time. I wasn't going to be able to function. There's a level at which I wasn't even able to function. And so I would sit down and think, I got to get this out of me. What is it that's irritating me? The hypocrisy. Okay, great. What is it? Name it. What is the hypocrisy? That people are thinking about exiting. Me and other people are thinking about exiting when they say things like, life is so long. Mhm. All right, put that down. And I would write it down. What else? It's like I'm running out of options. Okay. That could be either way. But all right, write it down. That maybe we should say, instead of my saying to the people who, with the best of intentions, were saying, you can always call the lifeline. And instead of getting up in their faces, people who were trying to be good, trying to do something constructive and positive, but are too sensitive to what's happening all around them to take the time to listen and look and think, is that really what the best option is? Is there really, or are we just throwing people? I'm just, the trigger warning, this is me getting back to my toxic language. It's been years since I felt or said this. I used to call it the human dumpster fire and say, every time people say, call the lifeline, there are resources available. What you're really saying is, I'm going to push you into this human dumpster fire and I don't care what happens to you when you land. Forgive me. It was a long time ago. What feels like a long time ago. And it isn't true. That was a lie I was telling myself because I was so angry. Those people were just trying to do the best that they knew how. And it's okay to be wrong. We should try to be right. But especially on something that sensitive and that difficult, I should have been more caring and more sensitive, especially because some of those people probably do have those moments where they feel unseen and their trauma feels too much and they're too embarrassed to say to somebody how they really feel in a measured way. And so they say something that's a smaller dosage than what really they feel. So instead of saying, I'm not going to make it through this weekend, they'll say something like, I just feel so tired all the time. Or instead of saying, I don't think I'm safe with myself, they will say, I don't. I just feel really lonely right now, and like maybe I could really use a friend to just be here with me. And as I started to ponder that now from a safe place after months of not having one of those episodes, not because I was trying not to, but because I've just been in a space where I so regularly experience what I call overview, and I experience it in small ways and in dosages. I get it through the work, and I get why it was that Nathan Bigler told me when I started the Church of Horror, and I asked him to become one of the founders, become one of the directors, and he said, "Do you ever go and serve among the homeless?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, sure." And he's like, "You do?" I'm like, "No, I don't know why I just said that. No, I don't think I have done that in years, not since I was a kid." I don't know why I said that. I guess maybe because I felt like you wanted me to answer whether or not I thought that was a good idea. How stupid. I'm like, "No, no, I don't." And he said, this was back November of 2024. And he said, "You want to come help us feed Thanksgiving dinner to some homeless people?" And I'm like, um, sure, sure. Yeah. Yeah, I guess. I'm sorry. I'm a little blindsided here. And he said, "There is a whole community of people who volunteer among the homeless because we can't sleep at night." I said, "Because you can't sleep at night." He said, "Yeah, I would get terrible insomnia and I would lie awake at night thinking I could be doing something good for somebody." And I'm like, "What do you do when you actually start doing it and then you feel tired?" He's like, "I would crash." I was like, "Well, is that what people need you to do?" And he's like, "At some point, you just don't care anymore." Something to that effect. Nathan, if you're out there, correct me what I just said. But it was something like that. And he said, and for a lot of people, it can become like an addiction. All of a sudden, you have to volunteer somewhere, or else you stop sleeping because you're so stressed out. And so I was like, "Well, that's interesting. I don't know what to do with that, but okay, sure, I'll come out." And then so this was in Thanksgiving 2024. We signed the paperwork for the Church of Korihor with the state of Utah, I think on December 1st of 2024, and I announced that day that I'd already figured out what our first mission was going to be, and it was it was going to take blankets to the unsheltered. And that suddenly became a huge change in my life. That whenever I started to feel too focused on myself and like I was going neurotic, I would just turn and say, "I'm going to go get some blankets and I'm going to take them out to the unsheltered." And my wife at the time would say, "It's the middle of the night." And I'd be like, "Perfect, they're cold." And I would go. And then it became a thing I did, not for, not because I was neurotic or even because I had committed to do it, but because I genuinely enjoyed it. And for days afterwards, I could function at a whole different level. And I felt more connected to myself. And suddenly I found more reasons, more things I could be doing. And that's when I started doing the Godless hymns. I needed some just to fill time and just to like get, sermons started and finished so we knew where they began and where they ended. And so I wrote "O Korihor," which is nowhere near as good, was nowhere near as good as it is now. But I wrote "O Korihor," and I wrote, because it was Christmas time, I wrote our first solstice song, which was an apple pie from scratch. and making the Godless hymns, it was so good for me because I would think about other people experiencing it. It wasn't just about doing it because it sounded good or because I could use it to make videos, which is normally how I would do. How I would think about music is about how good how good of a video will this make? But I would think I'm just going to put it up there with the lyrics, and it's going to touch somebody's heart who will feel like, oh my gosh, I never felt this connected to a hymn when it was about praise to Joseph Smith, or it was about Joseph Smith's first prayer, or if it's about the Savior on the cross, or the Savior in Gethsemane, or it's like, no, this is a song about sticking it to the man. This is a song about how pretentious I used to be when I was Mormon. This is a song about how churches have so much fucking money and the rest of us need it, and they don't even care. And then they tell themselves that that's what Christ would. And I would think, and I would be thinking about it, and I would think purposefully, Jenny will hear this song. Jenny Gage. Jenny will hear this song, and it would feel so true to her. I remember thinking that with the hymn, First Book and Last, which is about, those of you who are new, is a song. You can find all these, by the way, at corahor.org. In our Heroes of the Resistance album, it's a song about Anne Frank, that she told her diary, Kitty, that she wanted to become a book author, and that this diary was just a way for her to practice writing in a way that could move people and make people feel something. And a lot of people don't even realize, back in the day, remember a couple of years ago, it was like a while ago, this is almost 10 years ago, in 2017, remember when when a whole bunch of like Moms for Liberty groups all over the country started getting Anne Frank's diary pulled out of the libraries, out of school libraries, and they would defend themselves and say, wait a minute, it's not all Anne Frank diary copies, it's just this one edition. And when I heard their excuse, I thought, oh, okay, well, that is important information that, Democrats and liberals like me, well, I don't really consider myself a Democrat anymore, but a liberal, definitely, progressives like me, shame on us for just leaving that out. But also, shame on you. No, I still disagree with it. And that was that Otto Frank, when he found his daughter's diary, when his daughter's diary was given to him, he struggled with publishing it because that's not what she had meant for it. That she intended for it to never really be read by anybody, is the way he understood. And they say that after he read the diary for the first time, he read it straight through, and he came back out. He came out from sitting there and reading the whole book in one sitting, and told his friends who were gathered there, because she was gone, his wife was gone, and Margot, her sister, they all died in the camps, and he was the only one to survive. And Otto Frank came out of it and he said, I never knew my own child. That's how he found out he didn't know him. But who of us do our parents really know us? How many of us do we know our kids? Part of the joy of being a parent for me has been meeting my kids again and again and again at different stages of their life. And but one of the things that he did, he decided after they told him, his friends told him, his friends from the community, from the Jewish community, told him, "You must publish this diary. You must publish it, Otto, because people need to know that they did it to children, children who had hope of a bright future, and that hope was stolen from them by the Germans." That's why you have to publish it. And he said, "I can't do it." He thought, "I can't do it like it is. I'll have to cut some things out because some of the things she says in there are complaints about her mother and how religious her mother is. And I can't let her memory shame her mother's memory that way. I have to cut those parts out." And they said, and they apparently told her, because Anne Frank's mom was deeply Orthodox in her Judaism, and Anne Frank was not, and she was a child. And and so they said, "Well, go ahead and cut it out." And then they published it. Five Nights at Freddy. I'll answer that here in a minute. We're in the middle of something here. Um, but the thing that he wound up cutting out, besides Anne's criticism of her mother, apparently bickering about her mom, was her confessing about how she felt differently about women's bodies than about men's bodies, and that she had tried to kiss a friend who was a girl and rebuffed her. And after that, years later, after the manuscript surfaced again, after Otto Frank was gone, I think somebody got a hold of it and said, "Wait a minute, Anne Frank was not straight. She talked about having a crush on a boy, and that part got left in, but the part where she had a crush on a girl got left out." And for queer kids, it would be very good and constructive for them to understand, as long as it was innocent and non-provocative in the details, that even somebody like Anne Frank, a hero of the Holocaust, had gay feelings, had queer feelings, had non-straight feelings. How important would it have been for a young lesbian or a young gay kid to know, however different I am from my parents or from my peers or my siblings, I am like Anne Frank? And so they released an edition. Activists put together an edition. I'm not really sure who, now that I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head. They published an edition of Anne Frank's diary that included all of the things Otto Frank had cut out. And while I get that that's what they thought shouldn't be in school libraries, and I understand why, I had to say, no, this is my feeling as a progressive person. No, no, let it live. Let it be honest. Let it be true. And let queer people be seen in their queerness. Let it be seen so that people understand that it's okay to feel your feelings. And that's the whole reason why I was doing what I was doing when it came to exposing the hypocrisy of how we make it unmentionable. We talk about making feelings measurable and mentionable as long as it's not about existential crisis. And it's such a hypocrisy because that is the most dangerous feeling to not be able to talk about in a measured way and be able to say, without saying I'm not going to do anything to myself, or I don't have access to a means. I once had a confrontation. I've told the story before. I'm going to do it again. I got into a confrontation once, one of these Exmos, at a radio station where I was talking, and I went full tilt and didn't realize that the person I was talking to was somebody who apparently I had engaged with online already, or who had seen me engaging with somebody else online. This was at a time when apparently people were talking about me behind my back, and I learned about that. Did not feel great, but I've let go of it now. I realized what they were doing, and they started talking about me behind my back, saying we have to do something before somebody has to confront him before he does something dangerous in the community, or or that that the Mormons are, I guess. The way I understood it was that the fear was that members of the church would find out, would see me talking, and say that guy is the guy who wrote the Korihor argument. That's what all those ex-Mormons think. Hey, Dave. Oh, Dave, are you here? Hey, Dave is here. Dave, I'll get to you in a minute. Okay, don't bail. And I would think, I don't. All right, sorry, I got distracted there. I would think it's time for me to know where I'm going with this, and to start narrowing down the messaging. That feelings are mentionable, are measurable and mentionable. Oh yeah, okay. I was telling you the story about the radio station. Then I'm going to wrap up here. I got into this confrontation with a police officer who did training for wellness visits, and he apparently had been one of these people who had been talking about me behind my back. Maybe I was paranoid at the time, but I picked up on little things that he had said in this conversation, this little confrontation he decided to have with me about things I had said. And he said to me, what if, he said something to the effect of, what if you were right? What if I were to admit to you that you're right about the whole human dumpster fire thing? And I said, I would really appreciate it, actually, as I was so super toxic. And he said, and you don't care. He said something to the effect of, you don't care about the feelings of cops. And I said, no, I don't particularly. And he's like, and you don't see the hypocrisy there. No, I said, I do get that. Okay, so you're saying I'm a hypocrite. That's what you're trying to point out to me? Okay, keep going. And he said, I have to train officers on what to do in these wellness checkups. He's like, and he said, and I've seen you telling people online that all that happens if the police come and get you, they break down your door, they embarrass you, they humiliate you, they take you, if they have to, they will take you and effectively arrest you without a warrant. And I'm like, so far so good. I've said all of these things, and they're all true. And they were. He said, and then they take you to a hospital where somebody tells you just where they don't have enough beds for you. And they know that, generally speaking, the resources that are promised are not actually available, or not as available as they thought. This is in Utah, which does, from what I understand, actually does a better job with this than most states. And I said, keep going. And then an ER doctor comes out and tells you, knowing that there either aren't beds for you, or that you're not likely to get much help. And that most people who do it, every person I knew who did it, because I would ask people all the time, have you ever done this? They call it the grippy sock vacation, or they call it whatever. You ever done a watch, and I would say, "Did you get anything good out of it? Just tell me." And every person I talked to has said, "No, it was really bad, actually." And it's the same thing. I would ask people, "Have you ever called the Lifeline?" I've done it. At that point, I'd done it one time, and I realized that there was a counter that told you how many people, how many calls there were ahead of you. And when I called one time, there were 21 people ahead of me in line. And then after about 2 minutes wait, there were 15. And then it was like this long wait, and then it was like 14. And then there was this long wait, and then it was like 5. And I realized there's no way they just suddenly answered all those calls. That call queue, which I found helpful at first. This is how far away I am. Okay, well, I guess I just sit here and wait. At first, I thought it was what a good idea that they tell you how many people are ahead of you in line. And then I realized, holy shit. What if 10 people just decided to quit and do it while I'm sitting here waiting on the phone? And I am getting closer to talking to somebody. I don't even know what resources are available. And 10 human beings like me just hung up and quit. And that's when I started to ask people, when you tell people to call the Lifeline, you have the best of intentions. But I would suggest to you that you learn what happens when that happens. I didn't think to myself at the time, I don't have anything else to tell somebody to do. And I'm not an expert. And there are people who are. And the more I started looking into it, the more I realized our feelings are not measurable and mentionable when it comes to neuroticism. Not because nobody experiences it except for a small handful of people, but because so many of us are experiencing it all the time. And so many of us are so ashamed because of the stigma around it. And yet, it wasn't until I was spending every possible minute of my life building up the Church of Horror, doing sermons, doing hymns, doing service, doing podcasts, connecting with people, that I had a long period of time, weeks, months, now a year or more, really, where I didn't have regular neurotic bouts of existential crisis. The privilege that I live in right now is not that I never get depressed or that I never have existential crises. The privilege, apart from multiple privileges, multiple levels of privilege that I enjoy, is that I finally found that there was a rhythm in my life where I knew that I was disconnected from myself, and I had turned too egotistical. I was too focused on myself. And that if I wasn't going to stop and do something for somebody else, I should at least stop and ponder that to feel the way that I feel is just to make me human, not to make me into a special category of persecuted human, whether that's autistic or depressed or ethnic minorities. Those are all things, the real things that people actually do, including me, experience some marginalization for. But it's everybody experiences something of it in some way. And when it becomes frustrating, and whatever the reason is that they decide in a perfectly logical, absolutely logical way that this has become too much. I'm running out of options. And for the sake of other people, I should just quit. I gave a talk when I was starting this, and I was advertising the Korihor argument. I gave a talk in St. George, and somebody happened to raise their hand and say, "We're seeing a lot of people. Uh, we're starting to notice people quitting, not the church, but quitting life. And with young people, it's especially dangerous. What can we say? What do you suggest?" And I had said, "Wow, that's a good question. I'm not an expert on the subject." I said, "I'm just a person who feels this way. So just take that with a grain of salt, what I'm going to tell you." And I had said at the time, I found this study where they studied all of the notes, suicide notes, and found that in the ones that in the study, in the history of the world, all of the notes that they could find, all the manifestos, all of them, and organize them scientifically. Might seem kind of morbid, but it was very good. For my autistic noodle, it went, "Oh, good, good, yes. Let's get that. Let's get the data out of that." And they said the most common thing behind somebody who actually then went on to do it, to leave, or to at least attempt, um, was a combination of two factors, two things that appeared in the note. One was that everybody else will be better off without me. Everybody is that I have to do it for the benefit of other people. That the others around me will be better off if I do it without me. Better off without me. And then the other one was I'm running out of options. And I said, I don't know what to do about that second one. When you feel like you've run out of options, you feel like you've run out of options. And it is fair to say that you may not be thinking clearly, especially because I was only at that time beginning to understand that I felt too stigmatized in my feelings to mention to somebody that I needed help with something even very simple. Like I needed a reference to get a job, or um, an afternoon off to go renew my driver's license. And I just couldn't ask anybody for help. And it would make me go neurotic. It would make me suddenly spiral. And I didn't know how to ask for help, even basic help. I'd grown up so closed off. And I said, so as far as that, I haven't figured that out yet. How to deal with that second part for me or for anybody else. But the first part is that people need to stop saying that you're not thinking clearly when people say everybody would be better off without me. Even if that were true, it's the most triggering thing to hear. Instead of saying you're wrong or you're not thinking clearly, I would encourage you to just listen to them. And you can be honest and say, I don't believe that because I don't feel like I would be better off without you. But I say at least confirm and validate to that person in that moment in some way. If it's familiar to you, and only if it's familiar to you and you know that feeling, then say that. I feel that way sometimes also. Say that. but not if you don't feel it. Don't tell a lie. At that point in time, nobody wants to hear a lie. And the other one, or the other way, is to say, I don't know what that feels like, but it sounds awful. And I'm sorry you're going through that. I wish there was something I could do. And then suggest something small. Is there something I can do, like take you to get a bite to eat or something? Or is there something, and just make a suggestion and see if you can open up the conversation to, is there something I can do for you? Can I show you that I care in some way? And stop saying you're not thinking clearly, because it's so triggering. And it wasn't until, that was in 2014, and it wasn't until 2024 when I had an answer to the second part. And it's been just percolating, just coming up again and again, as this whole last year has been so transformative to me. And I survived a divorce. I survived a time when I thought maybe my kids hated me. I survived the whole slew of attacks from Mormons. I survived all these things, and frankly, I don't want to overstate it, almost joyously, and thought over and over again, how am I doing fine? I'm not going to say happy. I still don't like that word. I don't even know what that word means. But safe the whole time. Feeling very, very like I'm not in danger, and I'm not alone. And then I came to realize only yesterday, as I was making this video, that the reason why I couldn't sleep, and the reason why I couldn't stop until this thing was done, was because this purpose, my individual mission, my purpose, that I had been not neglecting, that I hadn't been able to complete until I had done some healing. It manifests itself in overview. One day while I was listening to the Pale Blue Dot, and I said to myself, this damn poem, this gorgeous piece of prose, Carl Sagan in his genius, how did he know? What do I not know about Carl Sagan? Did he experience this? Was he trying to talk to me? Is it like those phrases that I wrote down that day? Did he know what it was? And he wanted us to know that it's just like Fred Rogers wanted us to know that our feelings are measurable and mentionable. Carl Sagan wanted us to know this world that we are on, we are only on for a moment. One flash in the dark. He didn't say that. I did, but I know Carl put that wisdom in me. And I just threw it out there one day. I don't think I even wrote it down. I put it in one Godless sermon and said, this is the light of reason. It's like the light that we exude from our bodies, and you don't think because you don't think about it. But you are emitting infrared light into the universe right now. Somebody asked me what that was and said, you started a whole church for godless people. You don't even know what you're here to talk about. I said, that's not true. I said, well, explain it. I said, well, it's like the light of reason. This is a Mormon guy I was talking to, debating with, and he said, okay, what is that? I said, well, it means a lot of things to a lot of people. I'll tell you what it means to me. And this is the reason why it has spiritual value to me as an atheist. Because he was one of these Mormons who was all about, atheists don't believe in anything spiritual, which at one point I might have agreed with. And I said, I used to believe something like that, but now I don't. And I'll tell you why. I said, right now, if the James Webb Space Telescope were to turn around, which it can't really do, and look at you, and to delete this planet Earth and delete this sun because it'll be in the way, and just you out there in space, which I don't recommend. If anybody out there has the capacity to do that, please don't do it. But for a brief moment, if you were there and James Webb were looking at you, it would see, even though James Webb doesn't see in the normal color spectrum that you and I see with our eyeballs. James Webb can't see the rainbow like we see the rainbow, because James Webb is an infrared telescope. It sees like an owl sees at night. And I'm always delighted to educate somebody who tells me, well, that's because infrared means heat, not light. And I get to educate somebody. Those are the same thing. In fact, it's not even effectively true. No, they see infrared. You perceive infrared with heat, which is a different effect of radiation. Yes, infrared is radiation. It's all radiation. It's electromagnetism. Somewhere up the line from the rainbow, you have infrared, you have near infrared, then you have far infrared, and then somewhere up the line, you have the thing that draws a refrigerator magnet to a refrigerator. Did you know that? Electromagnetism and light, it's the same stuff, different frequency. And it blows your mind to think about it. It does. It boggles your mind because it doesn't feel true. And yet, just like God, it is. Sometimes you look at life and you think, especially if you live a life of extraordinary privilege, somebody made all this happen so that I would be here because I was so important. I was so needed in the world. And it isn't true. But just like you exude light into the world, if you really know the truth about who you are and where you come from, it would dawn on you that it makes total sense that you are beaming infrared light into the universe right now. And for a reason that doesn't seem obvious right off the top of your head, like blood circulating through your veins and, heart pumps and yada, yada, metabolism, etc. And I said this to Jenny Gage, and she got it right away in this video we made. I said, Jenny, if you take a random atom from your right hand, any random atom, and the random atom from your left hand, any random atom, both of those atoms came from a star that died. And taking two random atoms, just picking at random from each of your hands, the chances of those two atoms having come from the same star is so probabilistically low as to be virtually impossible. That's how many stars died in the making of you. It blows your mind to think about, and yet it is true. The math is done. The math is in. It's true. Reality is so much more beautiful than fiction. And sometimes the fiction that we tell ourselves, well, yes, it could be very reassuring to believe that the world was incomplete without you. I'm sure it is. I've never felt it a day in my life, and I don't now. It's a fiction that can become very dangerous, especially if your brain chemistry suddenly changes one day, like it did for Robin Williams, and you no longer believe it. Or in those moments, it's important to know the truth. And I felt like when I was listening to Carl Sagan, I felt it so strongly. I felt this deep connection to him. And I'm like, this is fictional because Carl Sagan is dead. And I never met him. I never really even took an active interest in him until after he had died. I knew who he was, but I don't know, it wasn't a big deal. Not like Hitch was. Hitch, man, that one hurt. That one hurt bad. But Carl, I realized in the Pale Blue Dot, especially the audio recording, his actual voice, that beautiful voice. And he used his language, he used his words, he used his voice, he used his very breath in a specific way to make, as Carl Sagan does, to make us understand that this is our only home. That if we don't care for it and we don't care for each other, there's no one to care for us. Carl didn't have to say there is no God to make that message clear, because to Carl Sagan, the fact that there was no God, which he often told people why he didn't believe in God, for Carl, that wasn't the point. The point was that we are here taking care of each other because this is it. This is all that we have. And when you realize that every moment that you are shining in this world, that you are emitting this light into the universe for one brief flash in the dark, it's poetic license, but follow along. Just give it room. There's this bright moment symbolically where your brightness is only measured in the contents of your central nervous system. That if not the literal brightness, but a poetic brightness. I understand. It's a metaphor. You got it. Okay. Yes, you're right. Which is a metaphor is just a lie used for a useful purpose, but at least I'm telling you it's a lie. It's like when I talk about Korihor, which by the way I'm going to be doing on Myth Vision. I'm very excited. I'm really hopeful that's going to work out really well. Day after tomorrow, I'll be sending out announcements tomorrow at some point when I finally get to St. George. It's a lie for a purpose. It's a metaphor, and we can do that. We can deal in metaphor. You know, what would Captain Picard say? So and so in Jalad at Tanagra. Anyway, that we flash in the dark from the cradle to the grave, and how bright we flash is built on this decision that comes from within yourself, that you don't choose based upon information that you have alone. You have to have truth. You have to have a real problem that you're willing to see. And that real problem has to be one that's inconvenient to society to see, and hence why it's still a problem. Because if it were obvious to everybody that there was a problem, then somebody would pay enough money or put enough time or enough effort into solving it just so that they didn't get blamed for it. But when it becomes something that's inconvenient, like there are people, more people every year who choose to leave this life than the year previous, who choose to leave every single year, not just in America. If you don't, if you choose from within yourself, if there's a call within you, inside your feelings, in your body, so to speak, your central nervous system, including your autonomic nervous system, and you feel that connectedness to other people, it may dawn on you something that hasn't yet been discovered by science because nobody else knows to look for it. And that's when I finally understood what people were trying to communicate with me when I was toxic, atheist, militant, anti Mormon, strident atheist, all those things. That somebody was trying to tell me intuition is valuable. And I'd say, no, it's not. Only science matters. And they'd say, no. And thank goodness, I wish I could remember who it was. Somebody had said to me, unless you lose all your willpower because you don't know what it is that you want, you don't know what it is that you feel. How would you not know what you feel? A lot of people, they said, most people don't really know how they feel. That's why therapists tell them to write in their journals. That's why people say to say your feelings out loud or to write it down or to paint it. That's why people who are creative have to create something in order to feel better. And then it made sense. Okay, so you're telling me my intuition matters. Yes. And then I knew it in my head, but I didn't feel it in my body. I didn't feel it in my whole experience, in my whole system. I wasn't processing it. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll just store it on the shelf and just deal with it later, I guess. Back to building fucking shelves. And it was while I was doing that over the course of months and months, it started to come up in things that I did that resonated with other people. And when I started doing missions with the unsheltered, not something I'd ever thought to do, Nathan brought that into my life, and suddenly people who I thought, even critics, even Mormons, started leaving comments on our stuff going, I don't like the things you say or the things you stand for, but thank you for doing your work among the unsheltered. It really is needed. And we started to get respect among people. And a video I made criticizing Chief Mitiga resulted in an email from him saying, of course we disagree and that's fine. And thank you for the things you said. Can I use your song in my video? Overview, hymns, the mission work. All of a sudden, I didn't realize how I was surrounded all the time with people whose intuition was leading them to the work that I was doing too. And suddenly we were on the same side, even if we were total strangers, whether or not we would ever have been friends if we just met each other in a club, on the street or in a class or something. We might never have been friends. We might never have been on the same side. And my toxic atheist ass, in the days before I understood what I felt and how I felt, and had a conduit to connecting what I feel with all the other people around me, I would have surely just pissed those people off and gotten into a debate or an argument, and I'd have won, probably, and felt very proud of myself and gotten nothing accomplished. And then continued being the same depressed, angry guy, angry man in a world full of angry men who are often depressed, hurting everybody around me, and blaming myself without realizing that I was blaming myself for it. And with this broken sense of self, this disalignment between my head and my body that started to manifest in my thoughts as everyone would be better off if you just left. Everybody would be better off, whether or not that made sense. And then all of a sudden, I saw that I wasn't thinking clearly. Years I wasn't thinking clearly. Not because what I was thinking was illogical, but because my values were entirely on what is objectively true and not what manifested as intuitively true. And while I had thought, because of years of believing in Joseph Smith and the Book of Lehi and the Book of Mormon, and the story about, the lost pages, and, Korihor and Alma obviously wins that with Korihor, and, that I had spent all these years trying to convince myself of lies. And then my reaction to it when I left the church and I became atheist was an overcorrection, and I knew that it was an overcorrection, but I didn't know how. And after 20 years of being an atheist, I finally realized that if there was a mission out there for anybody to go and speak about and carry a message or a practice or find something that made somebody who was going through what I was going through understand and feel like there was a change possible, I was going to have to make it for me. There must be tons of people out there doing it for the system, but the only one who was going to make it for me was me. And it filled me with so much purpose that I no longer even cared if it worked. I only cared that I was doing the best that I could to do it. And that gave me the courage to fuck up. It gave me the courage to fail. And amen. Sorry, guys. Hey, Dave. Sorry I didn't get to you in time. I had to work that out. Obviously, if I'd have had a little more time and a little more rest, I probably would have written that out. But it was good. And so thanks for listening to me ramble. You guys might have actually learned in some of these more rambly godless sermons, seeing a little bit of what my poor Winter goes through. And there, a while ago, I said to Winter, this is years ago, I said, does it ever occur to you to just interrupt me and say, Joe, shut up? And he said, nope. I said, bullshit, don't lie. And he's like, I know how much it hurts you if I lie to you. So I don't know why you think I would do that. I don't even know what you think I would get out of that. I said, well, then make me understand it. And he said, Sometimes you go full autistic info dump, and it's beautiful. And I just love watching your eyes light up while you do it. That he's in love with me. So anyway, I really wish that I had the ability to bring on to bring up a video right now. I really wish that they would add that feature in there, or somebody would tell me how to do it, because I can't. I've pushed every button. I have pushed literally every button on here, I'm sure. And I can't find a button to bring up a video. So I'm going to recommend to you all. I wanted to get a lyric video done too, because over ambitious and pumping neuroepinephrine. Because the full song, so the devotional, the what is overview, it doesn't contain the whole song, but it has enough. And then I put in, a little bit from the sermon, and I put a little bit of the story with Ed White and the astronauts. And I put in a little footage of the blanket drive and of the mission for cherished families, and which we, as you guys know, you can always go and give, even if you don't have money. I get that there's a lot of financial trouble right now, so even if you just have old blankets or something, and I mean old blankets, especially if they're thick older blankets, it's a little harder. I mean, it'll probably be easier to distribute thinner blankets in the summertime, but it's a little hard to get rid of them, and I feel terrible when if it comes down to throwing them away. I almost never have thrown them away. I usually take them to a shelter and just give them over to the nearest shelter, or I'll give it to somebody who's going to use it to repurpose them somehow. But if not for the benefit of those people, or the benefit of the Church of Horror, I highly recommend we all do it. That you do it for you, because the more connected you feel to a stranger is the more connected you feel to yourself. And ironically, it wasn't until this that I came to see, and the reason why those lyrics came to me. I'm like, is anybody even going to get that? But it just spoke to me the moment that rolled into my head and said, one less than one. It seems like silly math, but deleting my own ego from the equation made me not zero, but everything, everyone. And it would never have occurred to me to even think that was possible. So, and every person I've sent this video that I finished today, and fought with my computer and my phone and TikTok and Facebook. I still don't know that the Facebook one has posted. So it's here on YouTube. I know that. And finally, it's on TikTok, and finally, it's going gangbusters on TikTok. But I shared it with a whole bunch of people saying, listen, I know you're not. I shared it with Jacob Hansen. I sent it to Christopher Blythe. I sent it to Mormons. I sent it to Chief Mitiga. I sent it to my old zone leader. I sent it to my old boss. I sent it to a whole bunch of Exmos. I sent it to Kobe Reddish. I sent it to Brett Hartley, who I normally don't send her anything, because she's busy, and I know that. And I sent it to Derek, and I'm like, listen, I understand that normally I send this to people who are in the Church of Horror, or who are connected with the work regularly, and not to you. But I just want you to know, and I didn't put as many words as this. I'd say, listen, I know I don't normally send you stuff, about what I do at the Church of Horror. This one's important to me, and it's worth risking whatever I risk so that you know I don't do this to pass the time. I don't do it to hurt anybody's feelings. I don't do it even to feel better about myself. I do it because it's the first time in my life I did work that really mattered. And I'd risk anything, any relationship, any friendship, any opportunity to promote the Church of Horror, to make absolutely anybody, my loved ones, my family members, my old Mormon associates, my best friends, my worst enemies, of which I'm grateful I have so few. I would put it to a stranger. I would put it up to anybody and say, who asks me, what do you do? What even is this? And I would give them this video and say, this is what I do. This is what I believe. And this is my purpose. And I think if you took a moment to really feel what it is that we're doing, it would give you some hope today. And I specifically sent it to some people. I sent it to Jesse. I sent it to MB. I sent it to Beth Magnetic. I sent it to my friend Shannon. I sent it to my daughter Scarlett, and said to each one of them, taking time to stop and compose, yes, different messages to each person, and say, I want you to know that I was thinking specifically of you when I made this. I know I don't do this often, where I specifically tell you, I hope you will watch this. In this case, I'm making an exception because it means so much to me that you individually know I thought of you when I was making this. You're welcome, Jesse. This is it. This is the work. I often go on TikTok and leave comments on other people when they start saying, oh, well, I get on TikTok all the time, you see it now. People deconstructing faith, and especially Mormonism. And they say, I can't believe they made us cover up our shoulders. And then they were doing this. Like maybe, and then somebody just goes off and rambles like I just did, and rambles about how unjust and how unfair it is. And how I just want to go. I love it. I love the women deconstructing the modesty standard. It's like, it's so enriching for me. And every time that I see it, I have to leave a comment on it. It seems, where I say, where they say, I want to reach out to every Mormon woman and say, you were always worthy. You were never unworthy. No man gets to tell you that your shoulders make the value of who you are inside. And that you just see them blossoming, and they reach out to other people. They reach out to people who are still in the church because they're still fresh from it, And it's like, it's beautiful. It's just gorgeous. And it's like, look at this conscious being, so full of purpose and wonder. The first thing they do is they turn to Mormons and tell them, you don't have to live under this. You can break free. It's all a lie. And they just want to help. They just want to reach out to somebody else right away. No toxicity, just love. Just pure love for strangers and loved ones. And a need not just to tell the truth, but to show somebody else that they have value. And I can't help but stop and leave a comment and say, this is the work. I say it all at the same time. I'm like, I don't even know what to say. I say, good for you. This is the work. And I just leave it like that. And I get responses from people saying, thank you. I get that now. And I'm like, this is the work. This is your work. And I see it in other people all the time and give them compliments. And that fills me with something. And then I go back to trying to fix some problem with the website, so trying to fix some problem with the app, trying to fix some problem with this, and all the work that goes into the Church of Korahor. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying there's a lot of work. It's shocking how much work. And then this thing happened, and in 48 hours, 48 hours later, exhausted. I could feel it in my body, and my brain still, or my brain still peeking at it and going, I don't care. I'll have to stop and pull over and rest for a bit here soon. But I don't even care. This is the work. It was like I got my comment to me. This is it, X Mojo. This is it, Joey. This is it, Chuck. This is it, First Herald. This is it, Korahor. This is it, Elder Rollins. This is it, Joe. It's been long enough. Go look up that video. And I'm sorry if I didn't think of you yet. Send it to you. Flashback.